So today, we're talking about Jesus. And we talk about Jesus often. But one thing I want you to think about is that Jesus existed and was here on earth at a time that was vastly different than the time that you and I live in right now. Back in Jesus' day, there was a certain way that society behaved. There were certain things that people did, certain things that people didn't do, and all of that was a part of the way the world worked at that time. There are things that we do now that didn't happen back then. There are the ways that we interact with each other now that didn't happen way back when. And one of the things was there were people who were really, really trying. In their heart of hearts, they wanted to please God. They wanted to make sure that they had a good relationship with God. And so some of you are familiar with the 10 Commandments. God gave us the 10 Commandments so that we could follow these rules so that everybody could be safe and everybody could be cared for. And then there were some other rules that God gave to people that kind of helped explain those 10 Commandments. And those are all things that generally we follow to this day because that's how we have a society that we can all be successful in. But back in the day, those people who were really striving to please God, sometimes they didn't quite get it right all the time. And so what ended up happening was those rules that they had for society, they started taking them super, super strict. And so they knew that there was good versus bad, and God was on the side of things that were good. But then it started being about, okay, well, we have to have good versus bad. We have to have clean versus unclean. We have accepted versus rejected. We have all of these things, and people are either one or they're the other. Now, I don't know if you've met people, but people generally aren't just one thing or the other. But back in the day, that's how they separated people. And it was really difficult because a lot of times the people in society who were sick, who were hurting, who were in need, who were poor, a lot of times people put them on the list of being rejected, of being unclean, of being not good enough. And because of that, that meant that in society, when people experienced those things, they also experienced being an outsider, being on the outside looking in. And so in the book of Mark, which is in the New Testament in the Bible, there's a couple of stories about Jesus who was interacting with people in society during that time frame when people were good versus bad, clean versus unclean, accepted versus rejected. And when Jesus interacted with these people, there was a certain way that he treated people. And so tonight we're going to talk about how Jesus interacted with a guy who was possessed by a demon. And Jesus chose to cast out that demon. We're going to talk about how Jesus healed people who were sick and were hurting. We're going to talk about how Jesus specifically healed a person who had something called leprosy, which is essentially a skin disease. And people who had that disease, they made them live all the way out on the outside of town. They couldn't even be near anybody. And imagine how isolating and lonely it was to be one of those people who was cast out because of the situation in your life, on the outside looking in. And here's what I want for us to think about, because it's not something that we talk about a ton nowadays. The whole idea of being demon-possessed or the idea of miracles happening. And what I want for you to understand is that when Jesus was interacting with people, this was back at the time where people didn't have the same understanding of certain diseases and disorders that we have now. So nowadays, when we see someone who is experiencing a mental health crisis or someone who is dealing with substance abuse, and we might pass them on the side of the road and they might be talking to themselves. Or they might be in an altered state. Or my friend Mr. Dave here was telling me about how back in the day, people thought if somebody had epilepsy, that something was wrong with them. They were demon-possessed, or they were a witch, or all these thoughts were around people who were just experiencing a disorder or an illness. But because of those disorders or because of those illnesses, people treated them differently and cast them out. Now, I don't know if the situation that Jesus was in that moment was he was interacting with a person who was actually possessed by a demon or someone who at the time in society was misunderstood and was dealing with some sort of disorder or illness. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because when Jesus was standing face to face with that person, Jesus treated them like an individual and chose to bring them in instead of cast them out and chose to interact with them. And so, even though we don't know all of the details of what was going on with the people that Jesus was interacting with, we do know that Jesus chose to treat them like people. So here's what I want for us to think about. This is in Mark chapter 1. And these verses are telling the story of when Jesus cast out a demon. It says, Jesus and his companions went to the town of Capernaum. When the Sabbath day came, he went into the synagogue, which is a church like we're in, but for Jewish people, and he began to teach. And all of the people, they were amazed because Jesus was teaching. I'm sure it was quite amazing. But he taught with real authority, unlike any other teachers that they had experienced. And suddenly, a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, "Why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." So we see here, this person comes in. So imagine a person come in and start screaming at the teacher who was Jesus. So this was a big deal. Start screaming at Jesus saying, "Why are you here? Why are you interrupting the flow? Why are you doing all of these things?" And Jesus' response to this person was, "Be quiet." And he told that evil spirit to come out of the man. And at that, the evil spirit screamed, and the man started having convulsions, and the evil spirit came out of him. Now, remember what I said. We don't know what the actual situation was in that moment, but what we do know is we saw how Jesus interacted with that person. We saw that Jesus wanted to take care of this person and make sure that person didn't have to struggle with the things that they were struggling with anymore. And so Jesus used the authority that God gave Jesus to make that situation better. And there's more stories in the book of Mark and in all the books of the New Testament where Jesus was healing people. There are stories in Mark chapter 1, verse 29, where Jesus and his disciples were healing other people that they encountered. There's stories where he cast out other demons, where he was interacting with people. And then, of course, there's a story where he healed the person with leprosy. In verse 40, it says, a man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. Imagine what that felt like, to be in a position where you're begging to be healed. And this person said, "If you are willing, Jesus, you can heal me and make me clean." See, there's that word again, because people treated this person like he was unclean. And he said, "Jesus, I just want to be clean. I want to be treated like I'm accepted. I want to be in society and not out of society." And scripture says that Jesus was moved with compassion. And Jesus reached out and touched him and said, "I am willing. Be healed." And instantly, the leprosy disappeared, and that man was healed. So we have all of these stories where Jesus was healing people and helping them have better circumstances. And so from that, we can understand that part of Jesus' ministry was healing people and making things better. And that really had a massive implication on all of society. Because remember, the way people knew how to do things was to reject people who didn't fit, was to make space and say, "I'm going to be over here and you're going to be over there." But instead, Jesus came up close and interacted with people. And so, when it came to the idea of people being clean versus unclean, or accepted or rejected, or included or excluded, what Jesus did was take all of those people that he interacted with, and he brought them into society. And he showed an example of how we are supposed to interact with people who are in bad circumstances or who are struggling. And so Jesus, he spent the rest of his ministry teaching everybody how to interact with each other. That's where we get this whole idea of love your neighbor, of caring for people. So once Jesus showed exactly what to do to come in close to people, to treat them with kindness, then he told us how we were supposed to do that. But what does that mean for us here and now? Because like I said, that was way back in the day, right? When Jesus was walking the earth. when Jesus could come up and interact with people physically in person. But that's not the case here and now, so what does that mean for us? Well, for us, we're the ones reading the stories about Jesus. We're the ones seeing the example that Jesus set. And so that means we have to do our due diligence to treat people the way that Jesus did. Now, I don't know about you, but Jesus didn't particularly give me the authority that he had to go around healing people. I'm not God. I'm not Jesus. But that doesn't mean that I can't do anything, because each and every one of us has the potential to do things as we interact with people. So here's what I want for you to think about. Jesus is offering us the opportunity to see people the way that Jesus did, to accept them the way that Jesus did, and to love them the way that Jesus did. And when we do those things, that is what brings healing into somebody's life. It's like I was talking about earlier. My mom was the type of person who would sit with people, who would hear their stories, who would love them no matter what. And when we can be those types of people in each other's lives, that's bringing healing. We may not be doing miracles the way Jesus did, but we get the chance to do small miracles in people's lives that truly make a difference. Here's what I want to leave you with today. In the United Methodist Church, which is what we are, it's a denomination, it's a part of Christianity. Our church, we believe that everybody has different gifts that they are able to give. Now, some people have stronger gifts than others, but everybody has an opportunity to use gifts. And here's what the gift of healing says in the United Methodist Church. The gift of healing is not about transferring spiritual power to eliminate suffering and disease, because that's what Jesus did. But it's the ability to channel God's grace and God's healing love to those who suffer physical, emotional, and spiritual pain. I'm sure you know somebody who fits in that category: spiritual, emotional, and physical pain. Healers are moved to be present with those who suffer. Healers pray for those who suffer. Healers visit those who are ill and are usually moved to extend a hand of comfort and touch those who are afflicted. Healers give their time and energy to offering aid and comfort to others. So that's the key. If we are going to be healers, if we are going to do our best to follow Jesus' example and bring healing love to other people, then we have to figure out what you can do to offer aid and comfort to other people. Because that's what bringing healing means into the world. Bringing aid and comfort to other people. So tonight in your small groups, that's what you're going to talk about. And I want for you to take it seriously. Because these are all things that we are capable of doing, of bringing into this world. And I don't know if you've heard any of the news lately, if you've seen the way people are struggling lately, but we could all use a little healing in our lives. And you have the opportunity to bring that. Let's pray.